starting with, if everyone can get a seat, after a little bit of maneuvering. Thanks for the word, for a bloody foreigner that I am. We can start, but before we start, let me just say that we asked Carlos to film the meeting, but he will only film the people speaking. He will leave the recording on of the discussion, but it's going to go through editing, so anyone that wants to opt out, or we will decide afterwards what will be put out in public. We do want a record of this meeting because we think it's an important one, and hopefully it's an important first step towards doing something about what we learned by a chance. So, my name is Tirza Weisel, and I'm a member of Barnet Alliance for Public Services. And what we do usually is monitor council's meeting and council's reports. And it was in this context that one of us, I think it may have been John Dix, that found one line in the budget report that was in the budget meeting in March. And this line, from memory, Rima might be able to correct me, spoke about social services moving residents with disabilities to residential care in cases that the council find it is a cheaper solution than supporting people in the community. And that's all we knew. It really raised questions and alarm bells. And in further digging, we then found the letter from Inclusion Barnet. I think I found it in a press release by the Labour group of councillors. I'm not sure, but this was brought to our attention. Yeah, it was good. Anyone that know anything about the care field know that we as a society moved away from institutionalizing people with disabilities years ago, in the 70s and 80s, and since then there was the personalization agenda, and there was more recently the Care Act 2014. All of this moved in the direction of enabling independence and normal life to anyone in society, including people with impairment, which society, by not accommodating this, causes them disabilities. So this sounds like a very bizarre move away from this trend of a much more humanistic and normal, to I'm sure everyone's mind here, agenda. And that's why we decided that we are going to organize this public meeting. We spent our time in the last 10 years fighting against outsourcing, privatization of the council services, and lately specifically against Capita. The connection here is that Capita had drained, and the outsourcing in general had drained, not mine, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Had drained the council's budgets and finances so much that the council now needs to find more ways to save money. And out of all the services that were outsourced, only two weren't outsourced. One is the street scene that collects the bin, and you're all aware of this bin gate chaos, and the other is social services. So of course they can't cut save finances in the services that are outsourced to Capita because they are bound by contract. However, they can squeeze even more the services that are still in-house. And as we know, social services is required to save £6 million this year and further 3 million next year. The recipients of these cuts, the easiest target are people with disabilities, residents with disabilities. So we have here quite a few speakers that I'm sure will be able to shed light about what happened before, what is happening. Has this policy change already been implemented? And then we hope to open for discussion for people to speak about their experiences, but also for us to think together if and what to do to stop this. So we have Inclusion Barnet here. We have Paul Hawkins, who is one of the trustees of Inclusion Barnet. We have Michelle Burke from Inclusion Barnet and Emma Hatfield. And we have Councillor Rima Patel, who is a Labour lead on social care. And we have Maria Nash, who is a resident and a veteran disabilities rights activist, and John McCafferty. Sorry.
Very good.
Who is a resident, and I mean, you will speak about yourself with her. I suggest that you guys from Inclusion Barnet will start, set the scene, tell us a little bit how this came to light, and perhaps then, Rima, you can take it forward into what was done, and then we will move on.
Yeah, great.
Please. And whoever speaks, I'm told by Carlos, needs the microphone in front of them.
Hi everyone, my name's Michelle and I work at Inclusion Barnet.
So can you stand up?
Yep. Can give you a little bit of an overview first of all, what Inclusion Barnet is. So we were set up as a Centre of Independent Living in 2010, and we are a DDPO, a Deaf Disabled Persons Organisation. This means that we are peer-led. 95% of the people who work with us have lived experience of disability. So mine is, I'm an epileptic and I have clinical depression. So we have people on our staff who have mental health issues, physical disabilities, learning disabilities and long-term health conditions. And we run different projects in the borough. So we have Touchpoint, which is our new service for anybody who doesn't get any services from the borough can come to us and ask us for support. So we have Barnet Voice for Mental Health, which is a support group for people with mental health needs. We have peer support projects linked into the Mental Health Trust. Barnet Giving, so we raise money for Barnet charities. Training and consultancy and research projects, and we also run 2 libraries, but I'm not going to go into that tonight because that's a bit of a contentious subject. So how are we different to other community organisations? So we follow the social model of disability, which is really important. So I don't know if anybody knows, when you go to the DWP and you get asked lots of questions about what you can't do, yeah? So where disability is viewed as a problem, the focus is on illness and disability and diagnosis, and the power is in the hands of the professionals. The medical model is also felt to ignore the social experience of disability. So I feel like my life's been enhanced because I have a disability. The social model is completely different. It values the social experience of disability. It enables people who experience disability or long-term health conditions. It promotes solutions and change as social responsibility. Promotes awareness and training on issues linked to disability. So I do a lot of training about how it can be a positive experience. And disability is a diversity to be included, not excluded. And its strengths and needs are defined by yourself with support. So IB, we believe that no policy or service should be delivered by any representative without the direct participation of those affected by that policy. Nothing about us without us. So that's really important. And we want services for Barnet's disabled residents to be developed by disabled people and truly reflect our needs as disabled people. We want to make sure that disabled people have equal rights to live in the community with choices equal to others and to be fully able to participate in society. And that's enshrined in the Disabled People's Rights in the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People. We also believe that austerity, good old austerity and the old cuts, so they've cut drastically to social care budgets. I mean, I'm sure loads of people here have been affected by that. And they're having a serious impact on us as disabled people. There's been a huge reduction in financial support available. People who have applied for ESA and PIP, and now we're being told that we've got to go on to universal credit as well. Combine that with all delays that happened when you sign up to be on PIP. It's really hard. It took 8 weeks for mine to come through. It was quite stressful for us. You had to go through an assessment, like Emma came with me to mine. That was really hard. Often increased poverty happened as a result of all of this. And it's well known that people's well-being, quality of life goes down as a result. So disabled people, we're being marginalised financially, and our rights and our freedoms are being eroded. So one of these freedoms, and it's really important, this freedom, is the right to live independently. It's been heavily campaigned for by grassroots organisations since 2019, and it's now outlined in Article 19 of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
I'm sorry, could I just get a glass of water, please?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just feeling it hot.
That's fine. You okay?
Really hot, yeah. I'm sure I'm all right, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, yeah. I just have sort of weird moments because of my depression I'm going through. Thanks so much.
So, the opportunity to choose a place of where we live and where and whom you live is really that's on an equal basis with others, without being obliged to live in a particular living arrangement. So, I choose to live in Burnt Oak. I choose to live in a 3-bedroom house that's falling down around my ears, but it's mine, it's mine and my family's. I know people who have been moved out of the borough and then shifted back in when money has run out. Is that right?
No.
No, it's not. It's disheartening. It's, for that person, it's very, disorientating for them. It's just downright immoral. So, access to a range of in-home, residential, other community support services, including the assistance necessary to support that living and inclusion in the community. And, we want to prevent isolation and segregation. When I was a support worker working in the borough, and I worked at Penta, it's now Dimensions, and they built a purpose-built building for people with learning disabilities who were being resettled back into the community from Harperbury. And I really complained about this building because although it's a lovely, great building, purpose-built, fantastic, it wasn't inclusion as I knew it. I wanted to work in a building where people had somebody who was an elderly person or somebody who was in their 20s. I wanted them to be included properly in the local community. So community services and facilities for the general population are available. They're out there. And an equal basis is for people with disabilities and are responsive to their needs. So what we're saying is the right to live independently is not being upheld, and that's being shown by Barnet Council's decision making. It's really poor. Experience of independent living can vary and can differ according to what your disability or what your impairment is and whereabouts in the country you live. So you might live up in Bolton and you've got a really good service up there. You come down to London, nothing. So, it varies as to where you live in the country. And it's also increasingly common for disabled people to be sent many miles away, which is what I've said already. From their family, their friends, their communities, the organisations that they link into. We've got a couple of Barnet Mencat people here, yeah, and that's really, that's a really local organisation that's important to you all, yeah? So you can't imagine leaving, can you? No, exactly. So we want to have that local connection, strengthened, and the local connection really, everybody being included. So, yeah. Oh, one too many. Right. So the good old cuts to services, the old snips as I call them. If they threaten to force people with disabilities against their will into residential care. Oh, well, we don't matter that you've got your own flat and you've got your own support worker coming in, and that you go out on a Monday afternoon to a club and then you go off to meet your friends at the cinema. Oh, we don't care about that. We're going to put you in a residential home because, it's saving us a bit of money. That's all right then. No, it's not. It's not all right.
Well, wouldn't that cost them more money?
It might do. So it shouldn't be a postcode lottery where we live as disabled people. And we want us to have the right support at the right time from the right people. That's really important. So now I'm going to throw it open to you guys and think about where do we go from here and what ideas do we have for speaking up about this. So we could hold off that until Maria and Paul have had their say, and then we'll maybe think about some ideas. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you for listening to me, everyone.
Did you say you work with dimensions?
I used to, many years ago. Many years ago. And now I work with these lovely people here.
So,
Okay.
Paul, please, from
So,
Inclusion Barnet.
I'm a trustee of Inclusion Barnet. The first thing I want to say, completely aside from that, is I was born in the early 1980s, towards the end of when the policy, standard policy was to put disabled people in institutions. But even as, and I would have been quite young when people began to move out of institutions, but even as a young disabled person grew up in the 1980s, I was haunted by this idea that at some point I'd end up in an institution. It's something that terrified me. And it terrifies me now. It's never really left me. And I think people don't really understand. I think a lot of non-disabled people don't understand the fear that a lot of disabled people live with. At some point, someone is going to say, you can't cope and stick in an institution. And even as someone who's now, in my 30s, living independently in a full-time job, I'm still terrified of the idea at some point I'll end up in an institution. It's something that I think that psychological fear that underlines sort of, the policy of institutionalisation is not always understood. The other thing I want to say before I come on to Inclusion Inclusion Barnet and what we've done is a quick history lesson about a thing called the Mental Deficiency Act in 1913. This was a act brought in for primarily people with learning disabilities to be put into institutions if they were deemed to be abandoned by their parents, neglected, guilty of crime, habitually drunk, incapable of learning, or simply if that's what their parents wanted to happen. Now, this was in 1913. This is one of the pieces of legislation that meant a lot of disabled people ended up in institutions during the 20th century. And I think what's interesting with that is not only that led to around 70,000 people spending, much of the 20th century in institutions, but also that some of the people in institutions were not the people originally intended. Some of the people caught up within it included people who were not disabled but were abused, neglected, illegitimate children, all end up being institutionalised under this legislation. And why I think that's important is because, we've got reassurances from Barnet Council that this is being carefully considered and what will happen. But the reality is that you bring in legislation and how the legislation is worded can have consequences beyond what's intended. And, the conversation at the moment is that it will have what council calls a minimal impact for the number of people affected. I've got written down, I'm trying to find a number here, 40 people I think could be affected. And I question, is that route in someone's lives minimal? If we're talking about 40 people, we're talking about one person, is that route in someone's life minimal? But also, is it 40 people or is it 40 people at the moment until that policy is seen to be an effective policy and then it becomes more than 40 people? And that's a key thing, I think. So as trustees of Inclusion Barnet, obviously what we are about, exactly as we were talking about just now, is independent living. And this is the sort of thing that, we're not, as an organisation, we don't desire to be political, we don't desire to get into kind of political campaigning, and we need to have good relationships with both sides of the council and the borough. But there's points where it's necessary to say we're here to represent disabled people, and what's happened here is not right, and what's happened here has to be spoken up against. And so we wrote a letter in late January, which was signed by our chair, Paul Baldwin, outlining our concerns to this plan. And we got a reply in late April, in which the council gave us some, I think they would say they gave us some reassurances that they'd done a equalities impact assessment and talking about what they'd found. And what concerns me about the equalities impact assessment is that a lot of what they talk about is the fact that, for example, this will affect a lot of older people. But that's because there's lots of older people in the social care cohort, not because it impacts on older people. This will impact on a lot of disabled people, not because they're disabled, because a lot of disabled people in the social care cohort. But that's obviously, as logic, that doesn't really work, because obviously why there's a lot of disabled people and older people in those cohorts is because they are the people who need those services. And it's not a case that, it so happens that some people within the cohort people are affected will be disabled, will be elderly. It's the fact that ultimately when you're bringing in a policy which is about affect social care, you are disproportionately affecting older people, you're disproportionately affecting disabled people, because that's who's affected by social care. And ultimately, that's what concerns me about the way this has been thought through, is that this argument is that, yes, it might indirectly impact on some disabled people, but it won't. It will impact on disabled people because they are disabled people, and because their needs are not being met by what's being brought in by the council. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of tease out of this, and I think that's where the thinking doesn't work. Well, also I think the thinking doesn't work because I think you were right, the lady there, I think you were absolutely right. I don't believe this will save money. I personally find it hard to believe it's going to be cheaper to put people into institutions than it would be to not do that. And ignoring the fact that, my understanding of the Equality Act is you can't simply ignore the Equality Act because something's cheaper. On top of that, I think ultimately, I do not believe the achieved saving will be achieved in the same way that I do not believe a lot of the achieved savings through capita have been achieved. And I think this is another misguided, misconceived policy, which is ultimately going to impact on disabled people's lives without actually having the net benefits it's even supposed to have. And I think that's my other major concern with that. That's all I'm going to say for now, because I want to give other people a chance to speak. But I wanted to give you our perspective on it as well, my personal perspective, and sort of why we wrote the letter as trustees.
Great, thank you very much. Do you want to tell us how it all came to light and what's happening?
Yeah, great. So what happened really was Inclusion. So you've got this story, which is that Inclusion Barnet wrote a letter to the council, to the leader, and also copied me in. And sometime down the line, I asked the CEO, Caroline, whether they'd received a response, and the answer was they hadn't received a response. And I was a bit frustrated, to say the least, because I think the least you can do is to reply to a letter that's been written by a user-led disability organisation that, as has already been illustrated, delivers a rather large proportion of public services in partnership with the council. So this came very much to a head at the social care committee meeting, which followed that. And I lead the portfolio for the Labour Party on the social care committee meeting. And it came up in the context of the budget and budget planning. And there were really 2 points that I'd like to make. Firstly, that year, adult social care was projected to underspend. So, you know, it's not as simple a narrative as austerity force the council to make that judgment. There's a bee spinning around, but I'm hoping it won't cause too much damage.
We need the outside. Can you open the windows there at the back and hope that she will find her way? Oh, okay.
I think
Shall we try to?
I'm just going to try and carry on. So, okay.
I think it's gone. Okay. Thank you, Philip. Okay. Rima.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm sure it'll be fine. Bees are quite harmless, really. So basically, 2 things. One is the argument that the council couldn't have spent the money because they didn't have any money doesn't actually stand up. It was an active political choice not to ensure that money was not spent. That's the first argument. The second argument, which is really problematic, is this kind of projected saving of £424,000 apparently will be delivered by putting people into residential care. Makes no sense. I mean, you know, that is, I have no idea where that figure came from, or the idea that residential care would somehow be cheaper than supporting people to live independently in the community. And that is irrespective of, you know, I am anti-austerity and really oppose the measures that have been made. But the point is the council could have made that political choice to ensure that people were supported to live independently, and they chose not to. So that's really, really problematic. The second thing that was really problematic is the way the council went about this. So actually we had to put a press release out in order to force the council leader to respond to a local organisation that does a lot of important work in this space and really does really pioneering work connecting disabled people's views with the delivery of our public services, and that was absolutely not on. The other thing that was incredibly problematic and frustrating is the way that you know, the council went about explaining this so-called issue. So they mentioned an equalities impact assessment, which they commissioned, and in it they basically said that this measure would not have an disproportionate impact on disabled people, which makes absolutely no sense when you know, the majority of people who are disabled receive and are beneficiaries of independent living intervention. Now, the response from the council officers and the political leaders, Tory leaders, to our concern was that technically this was not illegal because it didn't. They weren't actually forcing people through these so-called savings to go into residential care. But then my question back to them is, how is that actually the case if you've set yourself a target of saving £424,000 a year? That means fewer people will be receiving this service, or will probably have to end up in independent living. That means that implicitly, whether they liked it or not, there was a target because they had to meet that target. So, of course, that's problematic. Anyway, this whole issue was something that we were very keen to highlight because we felt that it didn't just have local ramifications, it actually had national ramifications. It was about, as already been said, the fundamental principles of the right to independent living, the importance of really thinking about a social model, and by a social model we really mean that it's society that poses barriers for people to live freely and as they choose. It's not the fault of the individual, and it's not innate to an individual that they're not able to realise you know, human dignity and human opportunity. So these were all really important points that we've raised, and I'm planning on raising it again June 5th meeting. I really welcome your thoughts and your suggestions on other ways that we can campaign and raise this question. Just the other thing I'd like to mention is that whilst I'm the Labour spokesperson for adult social care, there's a real support within the membership of the Labour Party for advocating on this issue. This has come up in our branch meetings, it's come up in our all members meetings, and we're very open to ways of working together and building alliances in order to ensure that Barnet can have a fair approach to serving citizens, and that includes disabled people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. I would like to point out the date that Rima mentioned of the 5th of June, which is the next Adult and Safeguarding Committee meeting. Do you know whether this issue will be on the agenda?
So I am putting a members item on the agenda for it. So yes.
So it will be.
Unless they find a way of blocking a members item from the agenda, which sometimes they can do, but I will intend to make it as difficult for them as possible.
Good. And you will be able to inform everyone here through Barnet Alliance, perhaps if there are changes. And until then, and it will probably come up in the discussion, but we do call every one of you and people around you to come to the town hall in Hendon at 6:30 for a 7 start of the meeting, and people who want to put questions about this subject to the committee can do it. Just speak with us after, and we will explain exactly how to put a question to the committee. So, Maria, do you want to put what you knew about it? I have to say that we should have had another speaker. His name was in the publicity, Jonathan Bell, who is a disability activist from Kensington and Chelsea and the member of SWAN, the Social Work Action Network. He's not here, I'm not sure why, but he also had some thoughts about it, because apparently, and when I did a little bit of digging, I discovered that Barnet is not the first one to invent this wheel, and I'm not clear whether this policy has been implemented already in other places in the country.
So my answer to that is that NHS trusts are doing this, and that is subject to a legal challenge at the moment. So yes, and it is controversial and it's being challenged. But I can share more information about that. But I have been in touch with national campaigners on the issue.
Great. So there is a national campaign, and we will learn more. Maria,
shall I go first or John?
I think if you go first, and tell us what you know, and then just get out of the way.
I need the table. I need the table closer there, please. I need the table.
Yeah. Oh, back.
Okay. I will now rise to the occasion.
Oh, very good.
So that everybody at the back can see me as well.
Yeah, very good.
So I hope it's all okay for you at the back there. If not, make signs, but not make the right signs. Otherwise, the bee's going to be after you. I've made some notes, so please bear with me. As an elderly and disabled person with dyslexia, I will try, so please help me along if I stumble. Okay. We are here tonight to talk about future residential care provided by Barnet Council. So, what does residential care actually mean? The Council's lack of detail on intent and the ambiguity only creates more fear, and many more problems for people. Barnet Council is looking to save £474,000. Unbelievable. It is giving their assessors overarching instructions to minimize the amount of support the council has to pay regarding people with severe disabilities. But I think it's for people of all disabilities, although they've put severe. In that regard, I'm now asking a question. What is severe disabilities, according to Barnet, or anybody else really? Is it if you have physical impairments, if you're in a wheelchair like I am or John, if you're on crutches, a walking frame or an electric scooter, or maybe you have sensory impairments, which I have, for the deaf or the blind, or people that are deaf-blind. Then we go into mental health sufferers, which I think goes across the board. That can be even more severe than anything. What about people with learning disabilities? Or people with learning difficulties, as they may say. And then we come to the big one, which is people on the autistic spectrum. It is so huge. Then we come to people with hidden impairments, such as diabetes, heart conditions, cancer, and one which many people don't really think about, and that is for people that have various allergies. They can be life-threatening. So, are they included in the severe disabilities? And then, of course, we come to the big thing that's going on now, which is about dementia or Alzheimer's. What about those people? Are they being regarded as severe disabled? Many disabled people suffer from not only one, but a multitude of the conditions that I've just mentioned. Then we come to the question of assessors. Are Barnet Council's assessors social workers, occupational therapists, NHS health assessors, or the CCG's joint commissioners? Who? Are they a panel? Are they going to be a committee? Who's going to assess all these things? Then I'm concerned as what up-to-date training has been given or will be given to them. And then, on top of that, who will be monitoring all of this? Will the proposed residential care facilities be care homes, nursing homes, or mental health wards where you get interned like a jail, one person for 21 years? Will these residential care be in Barnet? Or will the disabled person be forced to move to cheaper accommodation outside of the borough up to the north? And then the big question is, will people be given a choice? I have a concern will care homes that have failed in the past be reopened under a different name, but still run by the same people who caused these care homes to fail in the first place? And this is in order to save money. Sadly, Barnet Council has failed on many occasions to fulfill its duty of care as required by law to its residents, by both not enforcing the various laws and acts themselves, but also by their contractors, as previously mentioned, Capita, although they don't have the social services. They have caused huge problems that the council now needs to address. And all this creates financial problems for the residents of Barnet, as we are now seeing. So, not only me, but the disabled community are concerned, and they are extremely worried that they will lose their support to live independently in their own homes. And also, will they have a choice? One of the last things I would like to mention is regarding care workers. They are overloaded with clients. They are on 0 hours contracts. They do not get travel expenses going between clients. They are becoming so stressed that they themselves are becoming disabled. And then it is difficult to replace them due to the fact that there's not enough people entering the industry. Some care workers and agencies do not adhere to the British standards. Very often, family members have been forced to give up their jobs in order to look after a loved one, causing financial loss not only to their family, but also for the country, because we're losing taxes and the buying power to make the economy work. So, today is a very special day for me, and I'm a bit emotional because, it would have been my daughter's 40th birthday today. But sadly she died of meningitis. But I had to be here for you people. So I wish to thank Babs and Unison for allowing me this opportunity to raise my concerns as an individual disabled person for the benefit of all disabled people, not only here but throughout the UK. I wish also to thank all the hard-working members of Barnet Alliance for Public Services, Unison, DPAC, which is Disabled People Against Cuts, and Global Net 21 for supporting me in my role as a disability and human rights campaigner. Good luck to all the elderly and disabled people. If you need my help, I'm here for you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for coming in this special day and for highlighting really the questions that I think you focused the discussion for us. John, would you like to tell us?
Okay. So, hi everyone. So I'll start and give you a brief history from the beginning. So I broke my neck. Thanks Maria as well for that. That was very interesting and profound. So I broke my neck in 2003. I was on a lads holiday with my mates out in Greece. 21 years old. Flew back. Luckily I had insurance at the time. I think it was the first time we ever bought kind of insurance on holiday. Flew back to London. Well, actually, I was in Athens, Cat Hospital Athens. That I don't remember. I'd lost 2 weeks' memory from a medicated coma. Then flew back to London and was in St Thomas's Hospital for 3 months, and then in National Orthopaedic Hospital, Stanmore, for another 5 months. So that was basically rehabilitation, trying to move again, and getting some kind of function back. So recovering, well, I say recovering, getting back as much function as possible from a spinal injury. So after all that, and not really having much say in what I was doing, being in hospital for 8 months, met a in-house social worker in the hospital who gave me 2 options, that I could either move back to my parents' house or look for alternative housing. At the time there wasn't accessible housing available, so I was in a nursing home which was supposed to be temporary, a nursing residential home which was supposed to be temporary. I was there for 2 years, 21 years old, so quite a substantial amount of time when you want to go out and have beers with your mates. So obviously the staff there were great, and it was quite tricky because it was supposed to be, I think it was a YPD unit, Young Persons Disabled Unit, I believe. So predominantly the vast majority of the other service users were mainly end of life. So trying to make friends with people who die after 2 months isn't much fun after a while. So that was interesting times. After a year of being there, I had some kind of benefits coming through. So I got a taxi card, started doing some coaching for Haringey NCAP. Started doing some coaching for the Tottenham Hotspur Foundation. So, sorry, Philip. But I think the important thing was it gave me a sense of needs and a sense of action to go out and assist others within the community. There was a story when I was in rehab where a young individual who was about 5 or 6 in a wheelchair was wheeling past me as I was coming from the inpatients unit to the gym, and he wanted to race me, and this was about 2 months into my rehab, and I was like, yeah, I'll race you, like, no problem. It's a little 6-year-old in a wheelchair. So 1, 2, 3, go. He zoomed off, killed me, had no chance of catching him, and I had a tap on my shoulder from his dad, and he was like, he does that to everyone. And I was like, how long has he been in the wheelchair? He said he was born like that, and that really opened my eyes. I didn't have a lot of, prior to me breaking my neck, I didn't really have a lot of insight into individuals with disabilities in a variety of impairments I now know of. But that was one of the things that really turned my viewpoint as to internalising anger and trying to assist others to benefit myself and kind of feel better about myself. So it was kind of, psychologically it helped me to assist other people. So I continued on that route. So after coaching for Tottenham Hotspur Foundation and finding accessible housing, after 2 years, that was the main reason I was in the nursing home. There wasn't accessible housing available for a wheelchair user. Even though I'd applied a few times through the housing department at Barnet Council, they couldn't find anything that was suitable for me. So after finding accessible housing, I met an independent living advisor at Barnet Council. Lovely chap. He said that you could either employ agency staff or you can look at the direct payments policy, which is about 60 pages, and employ your own staff. So being young and a bit naive, I said I might go with agency staff. So he brought somebody in for me to see. It was a 50-year-old Chinese lady, and I was like, I think I'd go with direct payments instead, please. So lovely lady, but it just wasn't right for me at the time. So I read through the direct payments policies about 3 or 4 times, understood the responsibility of being an employer, made some mistakes initially, but it gave me a lot more insight to be responsible and take on more information where I probably wouldn't have before when it was given to me. So moved into a nursing home, employed many staff. Now I have 6 or 7 part-time staff members. I've been to university, I've done a BA degree, done a master's degree. I used to work for Barnet Centre for Independent Living and Inclusion Barnet. I now actually work for Barnet Council, funnily enough, in the prevention and wellbeing team, Fed Out Social Services. So I'm kind of on both sides of the fence in some ways. But I'm leaving that job to be CEO of an arts centre called Community Focus in Friary Park. So I think with all of the things that I've learned and been offered, if I was to come around again, where things seem to be heading, I think I'd probably still be in a nursing home, if I'm being kind of frank and honest as to where things might end up. I think having support and being given the opportunities to pursue a career, pursue a life, and having the options, that really shouldn't count for money in that sense. So it's really about, I suppose, putting forward case studies, and I'm happy to be a case study if needed in the future. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you very, very much, John. I think you kind of rounded the issue, and with your experience, and we have quite a few courageous people in this room, and that really gives us, I think, the perspective. With Maria's question on one thing, what does it mean to be residential, sending people to residential homes, and with your experience of being there, being in a nursing home and living independently, and the way that you did with society's help that was achieved with a lot of fighting of disability rights. So, just a minute, Philip, I just want to ask Emma, are you intending to say something now as well, or shall we open the discussion?
I think we can open the discussion.
Okay. So, we'll open the discussion.
Yeah.
For any, do you want to say something, Philip?
Yes, I do.
Do you want us to take notes on this? Or you can be taking notes? Oh. Philip, you weren't here when I said that Carlos is filming. Are you okay for being filmed?
Yeah, of course I am, yeah.
Okay, so... No. Oh, can you come here? Actually?
Yeah, I can come here, yes.
And, yeah.
Sorry. Oh, be careful, yeah.
And there's the mic for you.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, how can I explain? How can I start? I feel that I live around the corner from where I live around the corner around here, and I've got a 2-bedroom flat, and I live by myself at the moment. I have carers coming to help me twice a day, And this bedroom tax, it just gets on me, you know what I mean? I love it where I am, I feel central where I am. I'm very happy. So, sorry. Yeah, I've been there about 18 years. I've been there now in my flat in Whetstone, and I feel central there, And I know how I feel more complete. I feel loved by people, and I'm happy because I was abused by my mum because of my disability. I left home when I was 34, and I'm 58 now, nearly, and I feel happy where I am, And if I go into a home, I wouldn't be doing what I do now. Do you know what I mean? I'm very happy. But I haven't heard anything about it. But I know that other people, from other people, do you know what I mean? But where I live, I feel central I am, you know.
That's important for you, Philip.
Helen?
It's important.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah. And it reminds me of my late wife. My Susie died 11 years ago this year. We were together 8 years, married for 5 years. Because I was saying boo to someone said Tottenham, because my late wife was a Tottenham supporter as well. So I'm an Arsenal supporter. Yeah, it was a mixed marriage between me and my wife. But she died 11 years ago, my boozy Susie was. We were together 8 years, married for 5 years. And she was worse than myself. I looked after her with my carer Becky, and I proved her mum wrong that I could look after her.
So there's several things there, Philip, isn't there? The fact that you lived with Susie in your own house.
Yes, yes.
There's the fact that, you know, you've got problems with your bedroom tax at the moment.
Yes.
So that's what I was talking about before. I said how people with disabilities often get hit by the benefit system not working properly.
Exactly, yeah.
But the fact that you and Susie were able to get married, and live your an independent life, you've always told me how important that was.
Yes, you know, when I was at home, I never knew what life was until I left home. I left home when I was 34, and look at me now. I'm very happy where I am now.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you.
And I must tell people here who don't know Philip that he is a long-standing and valued members of Barnet Alliance for Public Services. And you, like John here, are again an example of why we need people with disabilities to live independently in the community. Your contribution to the campaign is invaluable, and your ability to live as you wish is really only down to the fact that you were supported to live independently. So thank you for sharing this.
Thank you.
I guess I don't see any other hands, but I wish I would. Catherine, thank you. Because I think really we need to start thinking about where we go from here. What can we do? We mentioned the 5th of June, the Adults and Safeguarding Committee meeting at the Town Hall. What other things we can do if we decide to turn this meeting into a campaign, if it turns out that the council is going to implement this. So I think just to focus our discussion, if people can say what they want, but also speak about what they think about where we can take this. Protest, complaints, what? So Catherine.
I just want to point out things in the Care Act 2014 that don't seem to be being mentioned.
Thank you.
Quote, local authorities should, and for the purpose of the Act, should means must, unless they can come up with a brilliant idea, why not, should encourage a genuine choice of service type. Choice. Not only a selection of providers offering similar services, encouraging, for example, a variety of different living options, such as shared lives, extra care housing, supported living, support provided at home and living domiciliary care as alternatives to homes care, and low volume and specialist services for people with less common needs. Local authorities may find the TLAP guidance top teams commissioning for market diversity helpful. Local authorities should, i.e. must, facilitate the personalisation of care and support services, encouraging services including small local specialised and personal assistance services that are highly tailored to enable people to make meaningful choices and to take control of their support arrangements, regardless of service setting or how their personal budget is managed. Alongside the suitability of living accommodation in Section 1 of the Act, local authorities must consider how they can encourage the development of accommodation options. So why weren't they looking for somewhere for John? Why weren't they providing somewhere for John? They're supposed to, in the Act, all through the Act, it says they should be looking around. If there's suddenly a demand for 23-year-olds to live in blocks of flats, shared, supported accommodation, they're supposed to build one. They're not supposed to say, oh, there's a good one in Bradford. Local authorities should consider how they can encourage the development of accommodation options that can support choice and control and promote well-being. The Care Act, all the way through the Care Act, the underlying principle of the Care Act is to promote well-being, not just in disabled people, in the whole community. Personalised care and support services should be flexible so as to ensure people have choices over what they are supported with, when and how their support is provided, and wherever possible, where, whom. Maria mentioned who are these assessors? Deaf-blind is particularly mentioned in the Care Act. They must be trained in deaf-blind. Not one in deaf and then bring somebody else who's got on blind. It's got to be somebody who's an expert on the two together. Because being deaf and being blind separately are nothing like being both. Autism is the same, the Autism Act. They must be specialised and trained in autism. And if they're not, they must consult someone who is. So Maria's worried about who these assessors are. Are Barnet using the proper assessors, or are they just sending somebody along, like she said, an OT? Not appropriate.
You refuse to be seen by somebody who's not trained in whatever. If an assessor comes to your house and they're not trained in your disability, you can refuse to accept them as the assessor. And that's in the Care Act.
That's good to know. The Care Act also says that one of the things that they must do is maintain family relations. Well, if the family are London and they've sent you up to Bradford because it's cheaper, how are they going to maintain family relations? Tell you to use a mobile phone? My daughter can't do that, so, you know. So are they going to pay for parents to go on the train and have a hotel to visit their disabled people that they've farmed out to wherever?
Or make their savings.
There were no savings. No. Because I thought, when I saw this idea, I thought, where are all these care homes? Where are they all?
And who's going to work in them? There's not enough people to work in them.
I don't know your name, sorry.
No.
Can I just say we've got members here of Barnet Mencat Speak Up group.
Can I say something?
This gentleman raised his hand as well, and I was going to ask everyone who did to raise their hand again.
A legal challenge is a key factor. There is a social care charity that's been going for just over a year. It's called Cascade, and it's run by a lawyer called Belinda Schwer. And so you can talk to them on the phone and get advice, but if you want to fund like a case study, for example, you can crowdfund the money. They can't afford to go, obviously, to pay for the court costs and so on. So you would have to, find a case study and campaign for the money. But I think you need to leave it, because the Care Act is constantly being broken. In terms of the Care Act, but it's constantly being broken by councils right across the country. And so I think that's really important to challenge them legally.
Just want to say in addition to that I also think they're quite shaking the Equality Act as well. I mean, their argument essentially is that they can do it because it's indirect discrimination and because there's a financial saving. But the Equality Act explicitly says that whilst financial considerations can be taken into account, indirect discrimination cannot happen purely because of financial considerations. So I absolutely agree with you that I think a legal challenge is an appropriate course of action, but I think it's not just the Care Act, which, to be honest, the Care Act has got a lot of good intentions but a lack of teeth and quite a lot of loopholes. But it's also the Equality Act where I think there is a real chance they're on extremely shaky legal ground that would be very hard to justify if really pushed.
In this instance, you could challenge the Equality of Impact Assessment, which says that there's no disproportionate impact on disabled people, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
anyway.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Can I ask all those who raised their hands to do it again, because I didn't get to Linda?
Not priority.
Sorry?
Not priority, only if this time.
Sorry, I don't know you.
Joan.
Joan, you said. And
My name's Chris.
yes.
Julia.
Thank you. And I don't know your name, sir?
Doug.
Doug. So, please, did you want to say something to complete what you said?
A lot of people want to speak, but I do think everything Maria said is correct regarding monitoring, support. All those things are absolutely true. And then we need, it's, a lot of people are being, I think a lot of things are going wrong for a lot of people. And I think, we need to get it on the ground at this latest thing and try and stop it happening.
Yeah. Thanks. So we will need to think how to do it when it comes. Never mind. She's interested in the discussion. Linda, you're next.
Just very briefly, in 2000 there was a new law, legislation, the Valuing People White Paper. It was mainly for people with learning disabilities. And the main part of it is rights, independent choice and inclusion lie at the heart of the government's legislation. So I think, I don't know if anything, it was the first white paper for people with learning disabilities in 30 years, and I don't know whether anything has come since then, but I think that's really important that we hold on to that. And I do agree with Doug and Maria that until there's a judicial review, this will carry on and increase the momentum. And just very briefly, at my daughter's last review in April this year, 2 senior managers brought up that she should be moved from supported living to residential care. I'm not sure whether that was for the benefit of the London Borough of Barnet social worker, but I've sent them a very strong letter and told them that if they want to continue on that I will be taking action, appropriate action. They've assured me that my daughter's tenancy is guaranteed, and I told them I'm absolutely sure it is. I'm telling you it is. So that's just a little bit.
So, because I guess that in order to bring a legal challenge, there needs to be someone who the council insists on moving. So, if this will progress, I hope that not. Perhaps we have a candidate here to carry, like Maria Nash carried the judicial review for the community when we challenged the outsourcing. But that's just an idea.
I'll give you the details of the charity and then you can send it
That
down.
will be very, very helpful. Thanks, Doug.
Can I just give a brief background to what happened to valuing people and valuing people now? So basically, undervaluing people, it was a white paper that the Labour Party brought in when they came into government, and then they refreshed it 10 years later. Great. It was never put into law though, and this is why we have a lot of our problems today for the learning disability community. I've always felt quite strongly that valuing people now was a good piece of work, but it should have been made law. And undervaluing people now and valuing people, we had partnership boards established. So who remembers the Barnet Partnership Board? Yeah?
Yes.
We still have them.
They
are under another name because I'm part of it.
So that...
the Involvement Board.
The Involvement Board, you're right there, Maria, but the Learning Disability Partnership Board, which was really important for people with learning disabilities, was dismantled. And what people have as a result are people banks where they can go along if they've got any queries or whatever. What I've had people come to me within the learning disability community and say to me, "Oh, Michelle, where's our partnership board gone?" And it was specifically aimed at what people with learning disabilities need. And what I've often found when I've supported people with learning disabilities is that because their disability is right down the bottom of the pecking order, if you like, this is going to sound absolutely terrible to say this, but you know, people with learning disabilities get forgotten about because it's very easy to walk over what they're saying, what they're feeling. We have members today of the Speak Up group for Barnet MenCap, yeah? You guys all go. Yeah. I think you guys should speak to Terza and get involved with something like this because you know this is something that you can help with. You're an advocacy group, and self-advocacy is so important. Julia, you were a member of the Parliament, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
So I've got Julia down to speak, and thanks for pointing it out, Michelle, because if they say they're not going to force anyone, but they're going to put pressure or coax or tempt someone who doesn't have the peer support of self-advocacy, of campaigning, they will be able to maybe not force, but push someone against their will.
Yeah, we do need people who have experience to kind of come forward.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's good to know that there is this self-advocacy group. I've got Joan next, then Chris, then Yusuf, Julia, and you next.
Nicola, my name is.
Nicola. Yes. Okay, Joan, please.
Should I say?
Please, yeah, as you wish.
I'm a carer for my son, who's sitting behind me. Now, you mentioned MenCap, and I do not want to tell you what happened with MenCap. It was so bad. I was in hospital, and he had the MenCap man come to the house, and he was shouting and banging on his door. My son has grand mal epilepsy, and he used to get very upset every time this man come out. I phoned up the manager, and she said, "Oh, it's your son. It's nothing to do with our worker." So my Spencer wouldn't stay in the flat. I'd just come out of hospital. He come up to me. I live in Potter's Bar, and he slept on the settee because he didn't want to see this MenCap bloke. So what the MenCap fella done, he called in a psychiatrist and said he was frightened of my son. Now somebody said, "Oh, you know what he tried to do?" He said he tried to get him sectioned. Now, I didn't know what section meant. I had no idea, you know. It was a friend of mine. Anyway, they were arguing with me, arguing with my son, the two of them. What I should have done was call the police. I know that now. But I'd just come out of hospital and I was ill. Then another time when I went in hospital, I had cancer. Somebody phoned up, and because my son was round helping me, and said I was living with a man. The man is my son. I've had so much hassle from Barnet, you just wouldn't believe it. Then the other week, they sent him a letter saying he didn't live in the flat, he was living in Stoke Newington from social services. So I phoned up and they said they're going to stop paying his housing benefit, whatever. So I was in such a state, I took him up to the Citizens Advice Bureau in Potter's Bar where I live, and they phoned up, and apparently what Barnet said was, "Oh, we made a mistake on the end of his..." Then letters have started coming to the house for a woman in his address. So I said, "You don't live here." He's been there for 17 years. So I think somebody working in Barnet Council is trying to steal my son's identity. That's what I thought. Anyway, we sorted it out. I phoned up the Citizens Advice, and we had a big meeting up there. And I've already got lasting power of attorney about 4 years ago. I had to go and find a solicitor, get it copied, and they sent it off to Barnet Council. But I've had nothing but stress and trouble. I've asked him to be moved up to Potter's Bar near me so I could see him every day, but I don't want him living with me because I'm getting on now, and if anything happens they'll chuck him out. So they said, "Oh no, we're different boroughs. The only way he can get to Potter's Bar if he gets an exchange," which a lot of people in Potter's Bar do not want to live in Quinter Drive because next door to him is a drug addict. So it's been one problem after another. The shower flooded the other week when we was going to the hospital. They took 3 hours to come round. They brought him a heater and all the plugs was off. He sat in the freezing cold for 3 hours. You know, I've just had it up to here with Barney.
And I think this is a good example how they can really achieve whatever they want with
They do what they
carers and people, disabled people who don't have the strength to fight back. And you have been fighting back, and it's.
If I
but
went
we
for
need
a
to
break-
come as a community to fight specifically against this policy change.
If I need a break, I have to take him with me. He has got grand mal epilepsy, and they said, "Oh, we can send a carer £300 a week a night." And I thought, I get £56 care allowance. How could you pay £300 a night? You couldn't afford to go on a holiday, could you? No.
Yeah.
So I'm really stressed, and I'm not well myself. But I've been fighting, and because I live in Potters Bar and he lives in Barnet, they're two different boroughs, and they don't want him there, and they don't want me here.
That's and your situation is
I'm
not
a carer.
unique. There are carers. There are many other carers
And
that
it's costing
have
me a lot of money because I have to keep getting
And your
a
health,
cab
probably.
to come over to his flat if he's not well,
Yeah.
or he comes over and he stays with me.
Yeah.
But I lost my bus pass because I moved to
There's
Potter's Bar.
a lot of.
So I don't know what to do, you know.
Yeah. Maybe we can also have a chat afterwards, but yeah, these are typical problems of carers, and
Yeah.
we need the council to be helping disabled people
But they're
and
not.
carers, and not to
Yeah.
act against them. Thank you, Chris.
Good evening, folks. My name's Chris. Just want to tell you my lifestyle at the moment. I'm part. Sorry for making you laugh, because you said early on, because you said we haven't got very many people from a People's Bank, but I'm part of the People's Bank here in the actual thing. What I think there's so many things blowing up my head. It's like a sandwich at the moment. Firstly, I'd just like to say that I have, so I've got epilepsy and under what's a thyroid gland. Now the thing is, my mum gets me tablets from the hospital or from the GP itself, and lately now because of the big B starting up, the actual Brexit coming up and things, it's very hard to get through. It's hard to get through the actual thing with the Brexit cuts and things to get the tablets ready for me. I live in a care home, with residential home with quality housing, which is run by Barnet Mincap itself. And also, I have a carer come in every morning to take me for a shower, to come out and sort me out with a shower. But the actual strong enough opinion, I had to get up, seriously. Last week I had to get up about 6 minutes past 5 because downstairs we have a person that's got Parkinson's, and also she had a bit of she had turned up Parkinson's. She had an asthma attack from it, and the thing was, I had to help her get inhalers out for her, get everything out for the actual thing. She thanked me for saving her life. But the thing is, right, we found out now she had
Sorry,
pneumonia.
can I just say something? Where's the support worker there? Why were you doing that?
No, because it was during the night time.
And it's still somebody there.
Yeah, I live on my own independently.
You said they called you, she called you, didn't she?
Yeah.
So there's nobody on site to you know, but in an emergency, why are you
They
doing
don't
that?
answer. They don't answer.
Sorry?
Has your car package been cut in the last few years? Your car package, has it been cut?
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
you know, that's what's happening all around. They cut car packages.
Yeah.
So
You definitely won't be sending money on people, even though there's no support package or
do you
anything.
live in a care home or in
I live in a residential home.
residential?
Yeah.
Residential.
Quality houses. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so then we probably experience like Doug said, the cuts again. Thanks for sharing this. Sorry, guys. Yeah, we've got half an hour. I've got Yusuf, Julia, Nicola, and Sherry. Anyone else wants to speak? Yusuf, you're the next.
I'm rather lucky. I have a family support, but I lived on my own with just a service called Pentahat. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. And I was really lucky to get my own flat. I was in a learning disability community, and I knew all the people who got those 4 flats. They used to go to my special school, so it made it. They checked, and that was the special thing about that time. You know, I live with my wife and my 2 children now, but many years ago, I had the opportunity to go to. I lived in Campston Close, which is on Brunswick Park Road.
I know Campston Close.
I used to love it there. I did get broken into once, but that's life, you know. But I had the opportunity through, and that time social services for adult social care was, it was very good at that time. Ivy House and they support people with learning disability very well at that time. I had a social worker and a duty social worker. I really loved it. I had to move from there because I had a child, and I needed a 2-bedroom house. Unfortunately, Pentahat couldn't. They did have a 2-bedroom house which was empty, but it needed two separate residency. But I was gladly moved to it was Spire House in Lytton Road in New Barnet, and that was supported living. That was me and my wife and my older son, and I lived there for 5 years. From there, I was very lucky. This is all true. I moved from New Barnet to where I live right at the moment with 2 children. I had a middle son, but he died of cancer. 3.5. But because I'm rather lucky. My family background, Moroccans, we tend to look after each other, and some people with learning disabilities. I'm sorry, I'm bringing it. Don't have that support full time like my mother and my father when he was alive. My brother was, me and my brother, we got on like a house on fire. It wasn't fire.
So you benefited from living independently.
From the start, yeah.
So you really benefited from being supported, but independently in the borough, without being moved outside.
I think that gave me the stepping stone.
Yeah.
And when it gives you the stepping stone, now I work for Royal Makeup Society, so in the campaigns department, and I've worked there 20 years. So I'm a campaigns assistant, stroke engager. I like to talk, as you can tell.
Do you know what I really like about your story is that I hear so many stories where people with learning disabilities haven't been able to have
If I tell you all my
relationships
illness, yeah.
and have children and get married, do all the usual things that we take for granted.
Obstacles, big obstacles that way, yeah.
But I feel heartened that you've had you know, a good story to tell.
Well, I have a brain tumour, epilepsy, high blood pressure, tinnitus, I'm partially blind, the whole of my left side is weak, but I never look back.
Yeah.
You know why? I don't have an eye on the back of my head. Serious note, unfortunately, what's going on is less community homes. I'm talking about real community homes like I was in, where people knew each other, and community homes is nice, but residentials are not. Because anybody, any Tom, Dick and Harry, any person with a disability can be put together, but one could have a mild disability, and the other one could have a person with severe disability with profound and multiple learning disability, and they may not interact very well. So, if they had to do these homes eventually, God forbid, I think they should, if they thought about doing it, to make sure you match each resident very well. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. And actually, we hear here all these stories, and everyone in this room has their personal story. One idea was, for those who are prepared to tell their stories on film, we can make it into short campaign videos. If we are turning this into a campaign, this will be a very powerful tool. So you said you like talking. Would you be happy to talk on camera? And
This is a joke. No. So anything which helps the community, the LD or disability community.
Brilliant. Okay. So I think we will take it forward. There was a page passed around, and many people put their details. If anyone wants to get involved and didn't put their contact details here, please do this. And I now have Julia and then Nicola.
Hello, my name's Julia, and I'm from Barnet Bencash as well. And I'm going to say, I once had a little breakdown about to move out, but for my parents as well, because they like me to move out because they're getting older as well, and there was like issues and things. So anyway, but they want me to move out, so I look in so they can see I'm what's it called? When they get, if anything happened to them, they know I'm in a safe place as well. And Philip, actually, him and his his carer's husband helped me as well, because Philip said a lot in the past to people's choice and partnership. And he helped me that day, that time anyway. But I moved into this house, and people were all in the house. It was terrible. They were stealing my food in the fridge and in the cupboards, and they were stealing all my drinks. And there was a girl in the house. Yeah, there was a girl in the house who tried to take my phone away. Trying to take my phone and use it all the time when I was trying to sleep at night. She was keep coming in my room, and she was keep asking for my phone and everything. So afterward, my parents didn't want me to live there. So, but my social worker was around with me, and he was helping at the time and things. And I had them around, and my doctor around, my therapy doctor, and my parents and my social worker, everyone around, and they were talking about it. And afterwards, because they said the house was no good for me, so I went back to my parents, and I spoke about what sort of house that I actually need for my, because I'm independent, I can speak, I need, and he's got all that details. But since then, I've been trying to get him, and he's not got back to me. So when I had him before, he said that he was helping. He's going to move on. This is social worker for Barnet House.
Yeah.
Shall I mention the name?
No.
No, I won't mention them. Right. But they're all the same because what they do is they come in. Yeah, they're useless. Exactly. Because what they do is they come around, they see you, and then when you get used to knowing them, they start saying they're moving on to somebody else.
Yeah.
Which is really ridiculous.
Yeah.
So and when you just get to know them, they know you. Why they move to someone else, and then you don't know what to do after that.
Yeah.
And then I get stuck back in my parents' house. And then, which I want to move independently on my own or with friends or whatever.
Yeah.
People like me.
Yeah. Which is understandable and justified. I have to tell you, there are social workers in this room. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but the problem is, but the thing is that social workers in Barnet, okay, disclose yourself. Social workers in Barnet, around the country as well, are under a lot of pressure, and the things that we used to have in the past, because I'm also a social worker, is that you had the same social worker with you, and you got to know them, and they got to know you, and they was part of the community.
And then they come back to you.
Absolutely. This went out of the windows because of the cuts, because of the austerity, quite a few years ago actually. You don't have a designated social worker, you have to go through duty, and of course in Barnet the first point of contact is run by Capital,
and that's how
try to get through to them.
And we try to get to the people in Mencap, like I said, like the ones at night who are, which I was on equality housing. I tried to call them at night, no answer.
I think again we hear another example of what's happening here in Barnet.
And they don't answer the phone when you call them social workers. They don't answer.
Julia, was that the duty line for
I've got
quality
all
housing?
these cards to call on emergency. I call them and then there's no answer.
As a social worker who works outside of Barnet, I can tell you that I'm trying to call colleagues in Barnet through social work, social care direct, and sometimes it works, sometimes I'm lucky, sometimes it's impossible. So thank you very much for this. Another example. I've got Nicola now, then Sherry, then Helen, and I think we will then have time just to make some decisions and move and close the meeting. Nicola, please.
Quiet.
Sorry.
And basically, I have lived with my parents on my own until 4 years ago when my dad had a stroke, so I had to move into quality housing, and basically Barnet Mencap helped me move into quality housing with other people with disabilities, and sometimes I get a key worker or link worker to help me do basic skills, but I don't get support every day, and also sometimes I can go out by myself and do things independently, or sometimes if I go out to activities, they can help me sort out the money and stuff for it, because they're good. Basically, I've got 2 accounts. I mean, one I can use for myself, and another one I can use in support.
So you live independently, but you really don't get enough support.
Well, no. I'm saying that I get enough support, but I don't get support every day, and that's fine because I don't need that much support with things anyway, because I'm quite independent and going out to places by myself.
I see. So you live independently in the community and you're happy with this now?
Because I'm like Chris, I live in a quality housing like Chris does.
So that's a good one.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Nicola. Sherry and then Helen.
Hi, I just want to.
Excuse me.
I just want to raise something that Rima and I discussed in our local Labour Party branch. And it's an issue that in the Labour Party in Barnet, in Chipping Barnet in particular, we want to campaign on. And it's the context for this, I think. And what Barnet Council is proposing is huge cuts in social care staffing. They're proposing to cut almost £800,000 between this year and 2021, and then a further £725,000 between 2022 and 23. That amounts to 10% of the staffing budget. So that's in their budget papers that Rima highlighted to our branch meeting, and we've been discussing about a campaign. What's come out tonight is, I think, another aspect of the same thing, that they're going to cut a lot of the staff that are helping people and supporting people.
Yeah.
It's absolutely dire. And then at the same time, they're proposing pushing people into cheap, God knows where they're going to be, residential homes. So I think the whole thing stinks. And I think we need to put this campaign in the broader context of what they are planning. It's in their papers, and as I understand it, that budget has been passed.
Yes, and the most awful thing about it is that in that year, the budget was underspent. You know, there was no need to make those cuts or part of that. And, you know, a colleague of mine, Councillor Paul Edwards, rightly raised at that meeting, where's the money going? Because if adults is underspent, that means other services are overspending.
And did you ever get an answer?
Well, we didn't get a clear answer, but you know, going back to the relationship between this and the cabinet contract, I think it's interesting that one of the few services that's delivered directly by the public is underspent, while other services directed by a private sector contractor, where profits are being made by shareholders, and you know, executive directors are earning disproportionately seem to not be quite on par. It's very troubling. So I think there is a really, as Sherry said, I think there's a broader story about this, which is who actually gets to bear the higher cost here, and it's being, you know, it's workers and it's disabled people.
I think a lot of people can't get a social worker. They're entitled to a care package and they cannot get a social worker.
So it seems that
in this room that have struggled to get one. So it's underspent because they're not actually allocating social workers. And care packages to people that are entitled to them.
They say
that's probably
do that.
So parents pick up the slack and end up in hospital.
Exactly.
I think
So with 15 minutes left, and I will want to give you all the opportunity to sum up. I have Helen that wanted to speak, but I think from all that we are hearing here now today, there is a clear need for a campaign about the social care aspects of. So it will be just down to us to decide what we do. That's the suggestion for the hashtag for the campaign. Now that we live in the era of hashtags, I haven't connected with it yet. Write to the number 2, live independently. And perhaps if we are going to the town hall on the 5th of June at 6:30, we can make some placards to raise in the... So I don't know, maybe we should liaise with the Speak Out group and with Inclusion Bar and see how... 5th of June is only 2 weeks away. But I think we will need, if there is this energy in the room to build a campaign, we will probably need to meet again. let's think about when, after, Michelle, do you want to start the
Can we
close?
maybe think about putting in a freedom of information request about commissioners, how services are commissioned in the borough of Barnet? Because when I first started out, like John, many years ago, 95, 94, I started out in this borough, and we had really good commissioners then who knew what people wanted from services, how they wanted to have them, and what money could be allocated. Now, I've worked right across London, and what we've always found is that we've gotten to know our commissioners. We've met with them, we've held meetings with them, we've said this is what people need from services, and they've gone ahead and they've looked into it, and they've either come back to us with a compromise, or they've said, yeah, that's a great service, we're gonna pay for that to happen. What I have found in the last 10 years, all the good commissioners have gone. They've all buggered off, and they've all left because they've had enough of being put upon. They've had enough of having to make dodgy situations appear that they're the best situations going. Or you've got commissioners coming in who are short-term managers on services. And that has an impact on what we get as residents, you know? And it's something that we need to look at in how our services, for adult services, for learning disability services, for mental health, right across the board, how they are paid for. Who is making these decisions? Who is making the decision to hold back 50 posts? Is that right?
Yeah, that's a certain, yeah.
Yeah, you know? So we need to be looking at how, you know, who made the, you know, how is the decision made that we don't have a partnership board anymore, you know? And how is it being made that it's funded in a different way, you know? Commissioners will have made that decision.
Could I come in on this
Maria?
point?
Okay, we have just 3 minutes before we need to, but
Okay,
quickly.
this point about the about the partnership boards is that the partnership boards changed. They closed them down because they wanted to save money, obviously. So what happened is now it is changed and it's called the Involvement Board. Now the Involvement Board, and I have colleagues here that sit with me that are from learning disabilities. Yeah? You can bring the points out that is needed and comes from your community or from your members. And in that way we could address some of those issues which the council then, and maybe you can pick it up from the council and say, but now hang on a minute, we are raising these issues at the Involvement Board, which should go back to the council to be addressed and to be made into policy and to help the people that need it. We keep on fighting for them. That is one avenue to do it. So please let us know what it is. I can then raise it, put it on the agenda and put it forward. One of the benefits about the People's Bank is that they allow workshops to happen. So you people in the community can come and say what you want and the issues will be addressed. And then with that impetus in actually being able to take it to the Involvement Board, raise it with all the statutory bodies, because NHS is there, the government there, the local authority, the council is there. We even have sometimes people from Capita there. So, no, we need to get them right. It's no good just booing them. We've got to change them. We have got to make it so that there's a benefit to the people of Barnet, and not to the pockets of the politicians and to the people that are just devastating disabled people. So come on, bring us your issues and we will address them. Good luck.
And we'll need people to indicate if they are happy for their email addresses to be, if we can, obviously you put it here so you're happy to be emailed, but if we can share it and then share information and do some things. So you can send these things to Maria, please.
Yeah, there's only, because I know we've not got much time, there's two things I want to say to sum up. The first is that today we've heard from a lot of people who, whilst finding it difficult to advocate themselves and navigate services, can do so. And a lot of parents of people who may find it difficult, but ultimately just about, however difficult it is, manage to navigate for the family members who need them to do so. But there will be people in this borough who do not have family members who can do that, who cannot advocate for themselves. And those people will be the people who maybe they won't be forced or told they've got to move into residential service, but enough pressure will be put on them that they feel they have to because they won't understand their options. And I think that's the key thing, is that there are people in this borough who need other people to fight this fight because they may not be able to fight it themselves. The second thing I want to say is that I do not believe that people make decisions to incarcerate, I'm going to use the word incarcerate, people in residential homes who they think matter, who they value. And I think this is a huge thing that hasn't really been touched on, is that the bottom line is why people feel they can do this for disabled people, to elderly people, is because the people value disabled people less than other people. People value elderly people less than other people. And we need to make very, very clear that we matter. And we need to make very, very clear that we are going to make our voices heard. Because people assume we won't. People assume they can do what they want to us. And we will not stand up. And we need to make clear that is what we are going to do.
Paul, we need to actually campaign. We need to actively campaign. It's no good possibly sending letters here and there. We actually physically have to be there, chain ourselves to whoever, take our balloons and our banners and do it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. They will just put it in a drawer somewhere and not do a thing.
So I think
I agree.
True, but I think the next step really is the 5th of June, and I suggest we will take it from there. So I suggest we now decide we all meet each other at the town hall on the 5th of June, that is a Wednesday at 6:30, and we can stay 15 minutes afterwards if need be and decide when's our next meeting, because we need to do something. Rima, do you want to sum up?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say this has been amazing, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. There are many disabled people in this room, but there are also many allies and many people who, for them it's, carers, disabled people, and the only way that we're going to get this to have traction is for our collective voices to be heard. And what's been really powerful about this for me is that finding of a collective voice in this room. I've been in Barnet local politics for many, many years now. Before I was a councillor, I was very active in a number of campaigns. And this is actually the first time that I've seen this realised. I think it's a really powerful moment. And if the one thing this campaign achieved is bringing all these voices together, I think we will have made huge progress. So I really look forward to seeing you on the 5th of June. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for coming and for committing to this campaign. We will make our voices heard. Thank you.